It's time for episode 101 of The Crisis Show here on Google Hangouts, on YouTube, on Twitter, and wherever else you have this link around the world. Good afternoon from New York. My name is Rich Klein. I'm president of Rich Klein Crisis Management and founder and host of The Crisis Show. Today, we're going to talk about the real tragic floods that have hit three states in the United States and also in Mexico. We're going to focus on Texas because two of my guests here are in Texas and pretty close to the situation. First of all, my first guest is Mike McKenna from Team Solutions in Fort Worth. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hi, Rich. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. And Mike was kind enough to invite one of his colleagues, who I'm just meeting right now, and I'm glad to meet him. His name is Rodney Smith. He is the coordinator of the Tarrant County Fire Service Training Center in Texas, and also the former training coordinator for the Arlington, Texas Fire Department. How are you, Rodney? Thanks so much, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So Rodney, I'm going to start with you. And first of all, before we get started, just a quick update. The latest information we have from news reports is 30 dead, and I think it was still 13 people missing in Texas. And that's, of course, our hearts and prayers go out to the victims and, of course, to those still missing. So let's hope that we get some good news there. But we are facing a very serious situation. There's more precipitation coming, I understand. And Rodney, what I wanted to start off with before we get into explaining this training that you do, you are close to this endangered dam in Midlothian, Texas. It's about 25 miles southwest of Dallas. It's called the Padera Dam. Can you give us an update on that to the best of your knowledge, and also some of maybe also talk about the training that goes into stopping these floodwaters from these dams and elsewhere?
Well, the dam's definitely a concern. The last report we've got, they feel like it's stabilized. It was under construction, under renovation, and all the rain and the flooding hadn't helped the situation much. There's other dams in the area that they're questioning. One thing about here in Texas, most of your lakes are man-made, and they're basically sort of a levee system used to control floodwaters. And so they're definitely a concern. As far as the training, again, we have one of the only Swiftwater trainers in the country as far as a man-made that we can control. We can flow up to 90,000 gallons a minute of water. We actually have the Round Rock Fire Department here today actually training in it. A lot of our, one of the things that's kind of taxing, a lot of our instructors have been deployed in our own Swiftwater assignments as we speak.
So you're on the ground at Tarrant County right now, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we talked a little bit in the green room about, and I would love for you to enlighten us a little bit. We as lay people watch these news reports, focus largely on Houston, but I understand from our talk earlier that there is some kind of coordination, a lot of coordination that goes on throughout the state. Of course, Texas is a huge state. Talk to us about how you guys work together, Dallas, Arlington, Houston, and some of the other cities like Waco in Texas. How do you guys work together?
Well, one of the things, we do have a state mutual aid agreement. It takes a county judge to activate it, and so resources can be shared from county to county. We also have a regional integration plan that we're working on here in Dallas-Fort Worth region, where special operations, Swiftwater, confined space, trench, different teams are going to be able to be integrated into a larger response. We're using that system to address the first operational period or the first 12 hours of an event until we can get state resources in, which our first level there would be Texas Task Force 2, which is housed there in Dallas, and then Texas Task Force 1 out of College Station. But one of the things we're trying to stress is that each of the cities need to be able to stand on their own for probably the first 4 to 12 hours. And that regional integration allows them to do that. The other thing I think everyone needs to be mindful of is even though we have a disaster, we still have a 911 system and we still have the regular volume of calls coming in that have to be addressed. So it's important that we have layers that we can throw at these events and be able to manage them.
Yeah, right. I understand Governor Greg Abbott expanded the state of emergency to different counties. Does that affect the response? Talk to us a little bit about that. Do you have to wait for that declaration before you guys work together to help each other out?
Yeah, we have to have it organized right from the beginning. In a lot of large events, you have people who self-dispatch, and that can really complicate matters as far as accountability of knowing who's there and also of knowing their capability. There's a lot of trucks that have different things on the side of them, but when it comes down to it, we've got to know their capability and that they're able to function, be self-sufficient, and be safe.
So we're a couple of days in now into this. What are the most pressing issues right now for first responders as of today, would you say?
Well, one of the things is looking at, the weather, and we still have a chance of severe weather coming in today. And also, we've had teams deployed for quite some time now. So fatigue, and also a lot of the members that are deployed, they've got concern for their own houses and own families. And so we're looking at how to bring in the next wave of responders. But there's a lot. Even though the water's going down, there's a lot of hazards. There's a lot of electricity that's still out. There's a lot of utilities, sewage. There's a lot of things that in the aftermath that we have to deal with also to get a city back up and operating.
Now going back to that dam just for a moment, if that dam does not hold, God forbid, what do you guys have a plan for that in terms of evacuations? Have evacuations been called for already in that area?
Just about every city around is planning for large-scale evacuation and also housing evacuees from other parts of the state. And so, yes, those plans are being made.
And tell me about the federal government and FEMA as we stand today.
Mike may be able to speak more to that aspect. I'm more regional, and so he may be able to speak more towards their.
Yeah, first off.
Or generally, Mike, not to put you on the spot, but generally.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So Rodney did an excellent job of explaining kind of the process of how it works at the, when someone hits 911, when the first raindrops start to fall. But as we've talked many times on the show in the past, that sequence of events starts locally and then ultimately in a day, week, month, or whatever will end back locally. But in the interim time, Governor Abbott has declared a state-level disaster in, I believe, 30-something counties, which is more than a lot of states even have. In Texas, we have, I think, 254 counties. But once that happens at the state level, then that is kind of the key to also request federal assistance. And federal assistance comes in the form of response money and assets and relief money and assets. The response aspect, obviously, is going to be other, maybe the incident management teams coming in from the National Forest Service. It could be Swiftwater teams from around the country. So there is a tiered approach that is usually transparent to the casual observer, but there's a lot of steps that are that occur from starting what Rodney mentioned all the way up to the federal request. I think at this point, I don't think that Texas has raised their hand to say we need more out-of-state assets, but what I think they probably have done is asked for, and I'm speculating here, is that they're asking for money because we're talking about a lot of bridges and a lot of infrastructure that's been damaged beyond easy repair at this point.
Interesting. So Mike, while I have you here, we talk a lot on the show about, our audience is it's business, it's government, it's nonprofits, it's higher ed. But let's talk about what businesses and organizations need to think about in situations like this, because as you and I have said often on this show, you have to prepare for the worst. And a lot of people don't prepare for epic floods, obviously. What are some of the things that businesses should be doing now if they're in the middle of this, but also what should business leaders around the country be thinking about if this happened to them in terms of preparation? What are some of the things that you advise?
Sure, and that's such a common problem. When we talk to some of our corporate clients, the question sometimes is, well, what are we afraid of? And sometimes they want to get very microscopic about, well, they're afraid of this level of wind or this amount of water. But what I would encourage companies to look at with situations like this is that this is a disruption. Now, why it's a disruption has some relevance, but at the end of the day, it is the fact that it's a disruption. So telecommuting is one of the first things that comes to mind. We're talking about Houston, which gets a lot of press because of a lot of the highways that are washed out. And also, you've got a larger population that's impacted. There's not the same risk of life unless someone's walking around in the water, but there are people that can't get from point A to point B because of the high water. So if they have a critical job, what has been done to help that person continue their mission from an off-site location without having to drive into downtown or whatever? So that's the first thing that I would say is look at this on a large scale to say, if we are disrupted, what plans do we need to have in place? That's step one. Step two is going to be the level of personal preparedness at the employee level. So if someone is stuck in their house, what do we as company owners, what responsibility do we have to help our employees become empowered so that when they see the weather and they know they're living in a low-lying area, what can they do proactively to rise above that, literally and figuratively?
Yeah.
And to me, that's circling back to the commitment that the employers can have to their most valuable asset, which is their people.
I wonder if either of you, Rodney or Mike, if there's any sense that you have about businesses that would I mean, obviously, there's a lot of houses are gone and flooded and people still need to be rescued, obviously. But also, what are you guys seeing or hearing, if anything, about institutions, about hospitals, colleges, and large corporations that may be scattered around Texas? What are you hearing, if anything?
Really not hearing much along that line. When you look at where a lot of them are located, it's not in the low-lying areas. So most of the evacuation, most of the problems we're seeing have been a lot of them in the rural areas, and a lot of them have impacting houses. Now, with the tornado activities that we've had, the sporadic tornadoes, we've seen some commercial buildings damaged. But to my knowledge, not any institution or school or anything like that.
Yeah. Mike.
Yeah, one thing I would add, and Rodney's correct about that. So the viewers that are looking at this, I know you have viewers from around the world that may not be familiar with Texas this time of year.
Right.
This is not an uncommon problem. There's one feature that makes this so extraordinary, and that is the volume of water. But the presence and the regularity of severe weather in the spring in Texas is pretty common. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone's always prepared, but it does mean that people aren't really as shocked when there's severe weather. I'm sure Rodney can tell you as well. I know in my family, it's not a spring in Texas unless we spent, a few hours, a couple different times with my family in the bathroom and our pets, huddled in a mass because the sirens are going off. So it's not uncommon. What's happened is because of the La Nina weather system, it has brought so much water that it's added, it's filled the groundwater to the point where it's almost like concrete. So water, once it hits the ground, it no longer soaks in, it runs off. And when you see areas like we have in central Texas that have some topography, those low-lying areas fill up with water very quickly, and that's where the flash flood occurs. And I don't remember the numbers, but it's almost Katrina-like in terms of the moment that started raining to the moment that it reached flood conditions. It's almost like a levee broke when in fact it was just a flash flood.
Yeah, I just wanted to show the map here for people who may not be familiar. Even in the United States, people need geography lessons. But can you talk to us? I show you guys this map. Let me just zoom out a little bit if I can here. Okay. 1 second here. Not doing what I wanted to do exactly, but hang on. So Houston's down here. What's the mileage difference between Houston and Dallas, gentlemen? About
250, 300 miles, depending on where you are. That's from Fort Worth area.
So you guys can see this, right? I'm just gonna click it again in case for our viewers. So I'm gonna use the mouse here. So this whole area is in danger and beyond, right? Where I'm circling. Would you say? Or is it different spots in between?
I don't see where you're circling, but the main population centers would be Dallas, Fort Worth, which is where Rodney and I are. Lower to the right, closer to Galveston and the Gulf, is Houston, largest city in Texas, and then to the west of that is San Antonio. From San Antonio up through Austin, in between there you see San Marcos. That's where a lot of the heavy flooding is occurring now,
Really?
and where a lot of the people are missing. I say now, within the last couple of days, that's where a lot of the missing are from.
Okay, let me just pull out. I didn't know that. It's interesting information for me. So you're saying between Austin and Fort Worth, Mike?
Austin and San Antonio.
Austin, San Antonio. So this area here, San Marcos?
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now what is it specific? So I guess what I'm trying to understand is it's there's a wide swath here, if you will, of flooding. Is it the way that these cities are set up, or the waterways that make it worse for some areas than others?
Well, that area, Austin and San Antonio, Austin in particular, is referred to as the hill country, because there's hills for those people that are slow on the uptake. So there's a lot of topography there, and you also have several river systems. If you were able to zoom in between Austin and San Antonio, you would see some of the river systems. And again, gravity, we've talked about this before, gravity is always in effect, and so that water is going to go down to the lowest lying areas. And when it does so quickly, because the ground is soaked, is when you have the flood conditions. A perfect example of that would be if anyone's able to go out to Rodney's facility at the Tarrant County College to see their live water prop. That's a living, breathing example of how powerful, relentless, and predictable Swiftwater can be.
Yeah, Rodney, feel free to pick up on any of this
And
topography.
there's that area there. There's several websites out there. That area is referred to as Flash Flood Alley, and there's a lot of dynamics that add into that. I think Mike touched on a lot of them, but
I'm sorry, Rodney. Which area were you referring to for our
the
viewers?
area basically up the I-35 corridor
Okay.
between Austin and Dallas and on down to San Antonio. That area is referred to as Flash Flood Alley.
Interesting.
And so, again, Mike touched on it. We deal with that on a pretty regular basis, just not as wide scale as what we're seeing it this year.
Gotcha. Okay. So, Mike, let's talk a little bit about some of the work that you do with your clients and advising about emergency management and business continuity, some of the new technologies that are used. Also, Mike, I know you do a lot of search and rescue, a lot of experience in that, both of you guys. Talk to us about what the differences are, a search and rescue, let's say, in a flooding situation like this, where you have people trapped in cars, versus an earthquake where you have rubble, buildings. So talk to us about some of those distinctions, if you don't mind. Anybody?
Well, one of the things I'll add is during a swift, Mikey, during a
Rich, your audio was a little choppy.
Okay, Mike, can you hear me now? Rodney, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you. One of the things,
maybe Mike will pick up after you if you can hear us.
During a Swiftwater rescue, and it's pretty wide scale even from the beginning, and where with a building collapse or something, you pretty much have a central point, and that victim's not moving. In a flash flood situation, that victim's moving 5 to 20 miles an hour. And so setting up in one location is typically, you've got to have people downstream and sometimes in the next city. I know one of the victims was recovered 12 miles away in one of the recent flooding incidents down to the south. So it takes a lot of resources, because not only do you have to set up at the point the victim went in, you've got to get resources downstream pretty quick. And sometimes that's tough to get them there.
Yeah, I was watching CNN. They had one of your colleagues, actually, I forgot which county he was from. They were really struggling to rescue people. They had to make some of it up as they went along to reach people.
And the other thing, and this is not by any means a plug for our trainer, but most responders have done some sort of Swiftwater A lot of that has been shore-based, and they've never been in the water. So one of the things we encourage all responders is to get in the water so you know what it feels like, and if you fall in, you'll be able to self-rescue.
That's very interesting. Yeah, and Mike, did you hear the question? I don't know if your audio came back. Mike, can you hear me? Mike? We lost him for a moment. Okay.
So I would say primarily that's the big difference is on a collapse, you're dealing with a patient that's not going to be 2 miles downstream in 5 minutes. They're pretty much there. You're looking at delayering the site and things like that. You're also looking at wide area search. The dynamic of what we have going on, we have both going on because we've got the tornado, we've got the straight line winds. Last night, straight line winds up to 70 miles an hour. And so you've got that on top, and we've got that chance coming back in tonight.
So you guys in Texas, I guess you're most trained for tornadoes. What would you say? I mean, obviously you train for everything, but what's the prevalent severe weather in Texas?
Yeah, tornadoes. Tornadoes, and what's more common and actually what more people die from is flash floods.
That's what I heard. I was very interesting. And that's because it happens so fast, and they try to. Is it because the people are driving mostly, or they trapped in their homes? What do you?
Yeah, a lot of them are from driving into the water. We get a lot of kids playing in the water, so there's kind of a combination.
Interesting. So, what are your responsibilities today from where you sit and in your department?
Well, I'm a coordinator over special operations, so any type of special operations, your hazmat, your confined space, your Swiftwater, those are programs that are under me. We also have what's called a USAR working group, which is Urban Search and Rescue, and it's looking at the region, and we actually sit on the board on that panel because a lot of the training is done here, so we're able to train just about every responder here in the region on special operations, and also we're at the table to really know what they're dealing with and what their needs are from a training standpoint.
Right. Well, while we're waiting for Mike to come back, and I hope he does, I want to raise just a couple of quick points on my area, which is crisis communications, and this is just some quick observations from some early news conferences the last few days. I watched some of the feed. Mike, you back? Can you hear me, Mike? Well, anyway, we hope you will get your audio back. Anyway, folks, so what I was talking about briefly is the part about crisis communications, and for those of you who are leaders in government especially, I think this is interesting. Governor Greg Abbott did two things that really impressed me right away when he got to the podium in a recent news conference. I think it was yesterday or the day before. He did two things that every government leader should do. He expressed condolences for the families of the victims who are lost, and he thanked the first responders. He did that at the top of his prepared remarks. And so, folks, that's really important to do. It's so easy to do. Unfortunately, not everybody thinks to do it when they're under that kind of pressure. Contrast that with the Houston mayor, Anise Parker, I believe is her name. She was very factual. She talked about the deaths, but never once did I hear, at least in the first few minutes of her news conference, say anything about offering condolences or thanking the first responders. So it's really important to note that. And that goes for not just if you're a government official, if you're the CEO of a company and your people are lost or killed or injured, the very first thing you should do once it's announced at some level publicly that people were injured or killed or missing, you should immediately let people know your hearts and prayers are with the victims and their families and their friends. First thing you should do, and always thank the first responders, thank the people at the hospitals and beyond. So it's really important to do, very easy to do, but often overlooked by executives at all levels. So that's the crisis communications component of that. Mike, are you back with us yet? Yeah, we're still having some audio problems with Mike. Rodney, talk to me a little bit. I don't know if you guys have had experience with public announcements and news conferences and your involvement in that in public communications. Also, so maybe start with that. If you could talk to me a little bit about your responsibilities in communicating to the public as things develop in a crisis on your end.
We don't get involved as much in that. We do work with the public information officers from the area fire departments. There's been a lot of media coverage. We just did media coverage last week on our Swiftwater trainer and how departments from all over the state were coming in and participating in that. One of the things that I feel important, though, from a firefighter point of view, is that your communications be able to hit social media. And I know that a lot of departments are getting proactive in that, but I don't think we can move information faster by other means than social media can get it out.
Well, that's a great point. And Mike is also, if he does get back to us, we've talked about this on the show as well. It seems to me, Rodney, that Twitter is a place that people go. It's become the emergency channel. For those of you watching who are up to speed on social media, it's important to note that Twitter, even if it wasn't necessarily created for that purpose, has become the place for fast breaking news, emergencies, and crisis. So do you guys, so let me ask you this, Rodney, even though you may not make public announcements, you guys are watching social media, I guess, particularly if someone's tweeting out, hey, I'm trapped somewhere, or there's a problem with a flood or a dam about to break. You guys are monitoring Twitter for that, I imagine?
Absolutely, and even when I was with Arlington Fire Department, that was one of the things the police department and fire department had people that reviewed Twitter and watched. But a lot of times that's the first indication that you've got a tornado or an area's been hit, is people are tweeting that their area's damaged or that they've got a tornado on the ground. So it's definitely a great tool when used properly.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, just to elaborate on that, Facebook is also another place people go. And I've looked at a lot of government websites which don't seem to move fast enough in a crisis like this. And I even looked at the Facebook page of the government. They're behind some of them, some of the government sites. They're just, the way they're set up, the way websites, traditional websites are constructed, doesn't allow for fluid information, like a Twitter feed or a Facebook feed. And I think government officials and companies are getting more aware of that and starting to use that more effectively. I'm starting to see that. I'd say in the last year or two, I've seen much more of that used effectively. So if you're going to issue a statement, for example, for a government official and executive, you might post that statement on your website, but put that link on your Facebook page, or copy and paste the text on your Facebook page, and also tweet that out. In the most serious crisis situations, if you're a government official or an executive, you should be using YouTube as well. If you can't get to the scene of the crisis, you might want to record a video feed, a short video news release that does just what Governor Greg Abbott did in a news conference the other day: express condolences for the victims and thank the people who helped you through the crisis. Really important. And also let them know what actions you may be taking as a government official or as an executive, what actions you're going to take to try to resolve the crisis, whether it's flooding, any natural disaster, or some other kind of crisis, whether it's your fault or not. So I think it's an important point to make. Are you seeing and monitoring Facebook as well, Rodney, by the way?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're on Facebook, Twitter all the time, just trying to stay ahead of what's going on. Also, a lot of our classes, a lot of our instructors are part of response teams here regional, so we get a little information back on them also through social media.
Right. And you're seeing basically, I guess you'd agree, Facebook and Twitter are your two primary places you're going for that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, Facebook and Twitter are mine. There's other sites out there, and not to take away from them, but those are the ones we use quite a bit.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed that's really interesting as well, Rodney, and I'm not sure you guys are following this, there's also, just like we're live streaming this show, there's two new apps that have been getting some attention lately. Well, there's actually three, but two of them that are very popular because of the media are Periscope and Meerkat. And I don't know, have you guys experienced those at all, or watched some of those feeds?
I have not.
I haven't. No. I'm familiar with them. I think so. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hope you
Yeah,
take
yeah, I'm here. I'm here all day. You know, I had a union order nap, so thank you for your participation.
Whatever.
Yeah, I think maybe there's water on the line, perhaps. So I'll speak while I'm allowed. I wanted to circle back for a second and address something that you said earlier. One of the cautionary notes we've spoken several times about the downside of social media. The upside is, as you mentioned, there's a lot of very capable communication happening now. From a public standpoint, I think Rodney kind of touched on it. Is at the fire department level, or at the emergency management level, or and even at the regional level, there's a real danger of following social media to the point where it drives your operational objectives before it's been adequately filtered. So, case in point, Arlington, Texas, which is where Rodney was the training chief there, is home to Six Flags Over Texas. There was a picture that made their way around social media showing Six Flags Over Texas completely underwater, the roller coasters and that sort of thing. And it was quite a buzz for a lot of people here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that like to go there during the summer. As it turned out, though, it was not a picture of Arlington. It was a picture from 2009 of a roller coaster in Georgia. So I think most people aren't going to be fooled by that, but there's enough people that are, that you start with this groundswell, pardon the pun, of interest, of demands, etc., to address that problem when in fact it's not a problem locally, nor is it a problem currently. That's one of the downsides of help, I've fallen, I can't get up, coming across social media and real responders putting themselves at real risk to go out there and help someone because they posted it on Facebook. So
Mike, can I jump on that? Because you raised a point. I want to just follow before you go somewhere else with this. So how do you and Rodney and other first responders, emergency management professionals, how do you assess a rumor, a scam, or whatever you want to call it, an old picture put up there? How do you assess that and decide, okay, before we rush out there, how do we confirm this is real or not? How do you guys do that, if you can?
Right. Well, there's no perfect solution. Again, it's almost like Swiftwater itself. It's very fluid. What my advice usually is starting out with the most basic tenet, which is I've said pretty much every time you've allowed me on the show, which is do the most good for the most people as fast and as safely as possible. So if responders at all levels understand that, then the one person who's saying they're stuck in a tree is weighed against the 20 people that are stuck in a house. You're less likely to stop what you're doing and rush out there on this one tweet, for example. The other thing is, and we've talked about this as well, there are groups, some on the outside of the response organization and some that are embedded on the inside that actively monitor social media, and they're what I would refer to as embedded in the emergency management process. Volunteers in disasters, the Red Cross in some places, I'm drawing a blanket there, VOST, Virtual Operations Support Teams. A lot of them are starting to find a home inside emergency operations centers, so they're vetted volunteers, and they're not on the outside just screaming that we stop what we're doing and go help. So those types of filtering, when that occurs, then you're able to more smartly go after those leads. The good news is that because more and more agencies are starting to embrace social media, they're monitoring that, and so they can look at it in the totality. So if there's 20 people that are saying, hey, the road at the corner of First and Main is high and dry, there's no problems here, and one person says, help, I'm underwater at the corner of First and Main, then sometimes that kind of group dynamic tends to flesh out some of those errant messages. So, and again, my only point was not to poo-poo the presence of social media. It's just to keep that balance for those people watching, that we can't just go whole hog into following Twitter and Facebook when somebody says there's a problem. We have to use a little more of a balanced approach. The last thing before I forget it, I want to give a shout out to at least one company. I know there's probably more. In Texas, there's a Texas-born hamburger chain called Whataburger. And if someone's watching this from Texas, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Rich, you probably haven't had the pleasure, but it's kind of a Texas staple in terms in the hamburger market. They're based in Corpus Christi. They have a lot of businesses that are in this impacted area, and so they wrote a $100,000 check to I don't remember who, maybe Red Cross or something like that, and they also put pardon me, on their Facebook page, I believe, a reference that any uniformed responder in those 10 or 20 counties in Central Texas that show up at a Whataburger can eat for free.
Wow. It's called, how do you spell it? Is it Whataburger or Whataburger?
It's What a Burger. Is
yeah.
Okay,
I'll pull it up.
Yeah, Rodney knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Really strange.
One of the things,
okay.
one of the things, and I'll add on what Mike was saying, is that any agency that responds to a regular basis to emergencies, and especially large-scale disasters, you've got to look at what force multipliers you can bring into the equation. And that may be in the form of your CERT team. It may be in the form of other city departments. Someone that can be the eyes and ears, because you don't have enough resources to cover all the different 911 calls, the Twitter feeds, the Facebook hits. So you've got to look at others that you can put out there in the field. The ham radio operators have always been part of, I know, Arlington's ELC, but just someone that can check on that information and verify or deny those tweets or whatever means you're getting that information through. At certain points, even calls you're getting through your 911 system, you don't have enough resources to handle them in a large-scale disaster. So you've got to look at force multipliers, and that's something in pre-planning you want to make sure you include those folks and that they have the proper training to get out and do that, but to also stay out of the hazard zones.
You referred to the EOC. I think that refers to the Emergency Operations Center. Is that correct?
Yes, the Emergency Operations Center.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, you guys talk inside the ballpark sometimes.
Yep. Mike knew what I meant. No.
Yeah.
Mike, I wanted to get back. I know because you were offline for a little bit. I wanted to give you the opportunity because I know this is one of your specialty areas in search and rescue when we couldn't reach you. I had asked Rodney the same question, and maybe you could give some insight as well. Getting back to the search and rescue, because I think we're obviously still in a search and rescue operation in a lot of areas of the state. So how does it differ with what you call a Swiftwater, the flooding situation, versus an earthquake? And we've done shows on that as well, Mike.
Right.
How does that talk to me about some of the distinctions there? I'm very interested in that.
Besides the level of moisture, there's some commonalities and there's some critical distinctions. So for starters, from the response standpoint, there are two questions that have to be answered right away, and that is, how big is this problem and how bad is this problem? Those questions supersede any disaster. So if it is a flooded area in one county, that is a problem. It's the same flood over 10 counties, that's a bigger problem. So putting our arms around how big the problem is goes back to the opportunities like what Rodney was saying, and that is the force multiplier. If we have one bucket of water that fell over and got the parking lot wet, then we probably don't need very many people. But if we have 10 counties that are underwater, then that force multiplication dynamic is extremely critical. Otherwise, we will be overtaken in a hurry. So that's going to be the case whether we are dealing with an earthquake, a wildfire, a flood, a tornado, etc. So those are some of the things that are common. Rodney mentioned something else that I want to say is extremely critical. Of course, he and I come from the training background, but it is true, and I could want to make sure that we emphasize that having a lot of people there is not the same thing as having a lot of trained people there. So Rodney has an outstanding facility that hosts responders from all over Texas that come in to learn how to do what they do, but only better and appropriate. It's not the same thing as the person in the shorts and flip-flops showing up saying, hey, put me in, coach, because that person takes that, the 30 people that are missing and makes them 31. And we want to make sure that we minimize that. So those are kind of the high-level similarities between, for example, you said an earthquake and a Swiftwater event. You have to size it up. You have to know how big your problem is. You have to know what resources to request. And then you need to make sure that you put the round peg in the round hole, or in this case, the right trained responders in the right area to do the most good.
We've also talked about the use of the search dogs in search and rescue. Are they used in both those situations, earthquakes and flooding, or because it seems to me to be a problem with the flooding situation?
No, absolutely, they're being used. My response team.
Curious, yeah.
Yeah, so my response team that Rodney referred to earlier, we have about a third of us that are activated and deployed in that area that we spoke about near San Antonio. and they're actively involved in search and rescue, and then soon it'll be search and recovery. And we have two types of dogs that are on the ground there. One is what we call a live search dog, and they're only trained to find live people. And then we have human remains dogs, which are only trained to find people that are deceased. And both of them are being used appropriately down in those areas. The presence of the floodwater is a problem for any resource, whether it's a person on foot or a dog. But along the banks, and I don't want to get too graphic here, but when somebody dies in a flood, there are some predictable areas where they're going to be located, and the dogs are generally pretty effective in working those brush piles and that sort of thing in order to find those that are lost and missing.
Thanks. That's very interesting to me. So thank you for that. I want to ask both of you this question. What lessons? So we have this flooding situation, which was unprecedented, obviously, but it doesn't mean that we haven't had case studies, if you will. And Mike, I know you and I on the show have talked about things like Hurricane Katrina. So my question to both of you is, how do you guys study past disasters like Katrina, like Superstorm Sandy, for this kind of water situation, if you will?
Rodney's going to have a great answer. I'll tell you my little piece that just comes immediately to mind, because you mentioned Katrina. Now, Katrina, we showed up as a real butt-kicking large force of responders ready to do a lot of good. And then when we found out that the levees broke and the town was underwater, we're standing there on the shore with no flotation devices or no boats. So fast forward, now we have a flotilla of boats, and we have all of us are trained to the Swiftwater technician level or above, which is kind of, we can help ourselves and help our partners. And then we can, so we have boats and we have the equipment and we have the training. So just in that intervening years, that was one of the things that we learned, is that we have a lot of skill and capability, but we didn't have all the right training and equipment. So until we match those up, we're not going to be as good. And so now you look at the response. A lot of the aerial rescues that are occurring that you've seen, I think they've been pretty well covered because they're usually pretty dramatic. People being pulled off of rooftops. My team has rescue swimmers that are trained alongside the Texas military forces to fly those helicopters to go pick those people off a roof. So those are our teammates that are doing that, and we didn't have that capability even a year ago.
Yeah, and certainly you make a great point about that, Mike. Thank you for that, because we all saw those dramatic, tragic pictures of people in Katrina trying to be rescued. They're climbing on top of their roofs with the water coming in. Rodney, your thoughts about?
As we look around, as I look around and see a lot of pictures, a lot of videos and things coming in from the media, one of the biggest things, and for first responders, is structural firefighting gear is not designed for swiftwater rescue, and you are going to become part of the problem real quick. And so I can't stress that enough, that it's not designed for it. And matter of fact, a lot of department policies, it's not allowed at all around the water within 15 feet of the water. And if you fall in with structural bunker gear, you definitely complicated and probably taking a risk, and you may or may not recover from. Also, actually putting rescuers in the water is kind of a last resort. And like any type of rescue or any type of emergency we deal with, you've got to look at the risk versus the gain. And are you going to become victim 31, or are you going to affect the rescue? So you've got to look at what you can do and where you can do the most good. And sometimes those that are up in a tree or on top of a building may not be threatened. Okay, and so you really kind of got to weigh it, and you got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And the same question regarding Superstorm Sandy. Any lessons learned there that are being applied today and past few days in Texas?
I think with the widespread stuff is getting cities back up and running. A lot of the sewage plants are flooded, and that sewage is now flowing into your water systems. So there's a lot on the aftermath that I think Sandy showed that, yeah, we're thinking about today, but we better be thinking about tomorrow, because drinking water will probably be a problem tomorrow because of all the sewage plants and the different things that are flooded.
Right. No, I just was looking for a moment at the Houston Fire Department Twitter feed, and Governor Abbott, there's a tweet here that says, a number we will never know is the number of lives that have been saved by first responders. Real nice touch there. We always
Right.
talk about people who are lost, but it's never newsworthy how many were saved, right? It's not always reported.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, really good point
Yeah.
I wanted to make. So
Yeah. Bravo to all of them. There's a lot of very courageous work going on right now around the state.
yeah.
And a lot of Rodney and I have a lot of personal relationships to those folks that are doing that. So bravo to them.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, I meant to mention this earlier, that the number of missing, what may end up happening, obviously I can't see the future, but oftentimes what happens when you have a lot of people that are missing in these types of floods, it's basically what they're saying is we have 30 people that are unaccounted for, and they may be accounted for when they check the shelters. They may be accounted for when they interview family members that have taken them in, that sort of thing. And that's certainly my hope. As you recall, when we did a show after the Boulder, several years ago, Boulder had a lot of wildfires, and then a year after that, with nothing to stop it, they had a lot of floods, and so a lot of responders and a lot of people were impacted by the floods in Boulder, Colorado. The cell towers were down, and once the cell towers were put, they had 200 or 300 people that were missing, as I recall. And when the cell service was restored, people were able to connect with their phones from the mountains where they were, and then start calling in saying, "Hey, I'm here. I need help." So the number went from 200 or 300 people that were missing down to like 10 or 12.
Yeah.
My hope is that that's the case here. The other downs, that's the good news, and that's probably how I should end, is that that's hopefully what will happen, is that some of those 30 that are missing will be discovered alive and well, eating at Whataburger or something, and they just haven't checked in. The other side of that is, and this goes back to some of the lessons we've had to endure after Katrina, is that there are people that are just plain going to remain unaccounted for, and that's one of the harsh realities of disaster work, is that we have to learn how to bring these things to a close, even when we don't find everybody that's unaccounted for. 300 and something people, I believe, are still missing from Katrina, and they'll likely never be found.
Wow. And of course, the one story that has been covered a lot in the last day or so is this family whose vacation home was washed away, and I think the father survived, but the mother and the two children are still missing. And there was actually a phone call. I think she made a phone call to her sister saying, "I love you," and her house has just been washed away, and that was the last she heard of her. So that's a real situation where our hearts break when you hear those stories, because she has not, at least before we started this broadcast, there was no new development on that front, but at least it was a verifiable situation where there was a communication that went out that said, we've been washed away.
Well, and we focus a lot of times on the rescues and the things that's going on, but also the mental standpoint of that. As an incident commander, at a certain point, I have to transition that incident from a rescue to a recovery, and especially dealing with the volume of calls and incidents those responders dealt with. There's a mental aspect of it also, and trying to get a lot of that stuff, kind of behind you is very, very tough. That's one of the toughest decisions you'll ever have to make, that changing it from a rescue to a recovery.
Yeah, and just to follow, and thank you for raising that, Rodney. And I want to just, there's a story in the Star Telegram about a situation, disaster, a tragedy in your neck of the woods in Tarrant County. They found a man who had entered a restricted area of his kayak in the Trinity River Channel. I don't know if that's near you.
Yes.
That was, I think, they found him Sunday afternoon in a discharge pool of the Trinity River. And the reason I raise that is that I guess both of you have some messages for people when these things happen. How do you communicate? Hey, don't go there.
Well,
I mean, stupidity really can create havoc with your jobs, I'm sure. When people don't follow evacuation orders, don't follow orders to stay out of certain areas, right?
if that's the same story we're referring to, I think there was about 6.
Yes,
including a young girl, 8-year-old girl that entered those areas.
Yeah, it's Joshua Reed of Fort Worth and 5 others had apparently entered the area. That's what as far as I got in the story. I was reading the headline. Yeah. Yes,
and I think people a lot of times they don't know the hazard. One of the training pieces that we have here at the college is a low-head dam. And the low-head dam, where that water changes elevations a lot of times 2 to 3 feet, and that washing machine that it creates down below That's where a lot of kayakers get hung up, and that's where that gentleman got basically hung up. And so the other piece of that is with our trainer here, we actually put rescuers in those low heads in case they fall out. There are techniques you can use to get out, but that's a very dangerous situation. And people looking from the bank, it doesn't look that complicated, but once you get in, it's hard to get out of those low head dams.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, yeah, just to return to the subject of social media, and Mike, you can pick up on this, is warning people that certain areas are restricted, certain areas are dangerous. That's where social media can be very useful for departments where you are, Rodney, and also for your clients, Mike, correct?
Right. And again, there's the upside and the downside. I realize I'm kind of the naysayer sometimes about this, but there is a downside. And what we're talking about, the 6 people, I don't know the conditions of what led them there, but it sounds to me like disaster tourism, which is very common. And so the upside is you notify people, and I doubt that any of the people that are going to go around the barricades driving through high water are probably watching the show, because those two kind of attitudes are not compatible. But when they see all this disaster and they want to see it up close, that's what they do. They go get in their kayak and they go, well, those dangers don't apply to me. I'm going to drive around the barricades, etc. So the messaging, I think, has to continue to go, but at the same time, I think that a little bit of realistic talk with the public to say, to feature the people and the stories of what led them there, to connect with the people that are making these bad choices. In other words, turn around, don't drown is effective. It's pithy, it's short, but it's kind of like saying don't wet the bed. And the last thing the kid hears is wet the bed. That's the word they hear in their mouth. So a lot of these people are not turning around, and they are drowning because they don't think that it applies to them. So featuring the stories of the guy that takes his 8-year-old daughter to the floodwaters, it might be salt in the wound of that family, but it may connect with people that may be willing to do the same.
Yeah, and I would just add to that as we start to wrap up the show in a few minutes. I'm a fan of citizen journalism. I think it's good when people can provide, solid, when it's good information, or they could show photos or videos of dangerous areas that help you guys out. The problem with that, though, is, and I think this is where I obviously agree with you, Mike, is that people venture into these dangerous areas to do just that, to try to be, create a viral video or to put something on Instagram to get themselves some attention, I guess, as well. So that's probably the double-edged sword of that situation as well. Anyway, is there anything else you guys want to add on any of these points you raised? And by the way, thank you both very much for these great insights on anything we talked about before we wrap up the show. Rodney, Mike, any closing thoughts?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity for you've given us to kind of share our perspective, and anytime you're down in the Texas area, I'll be glad to suit you up and put you in Swiftwater trainer.
Okay, I'll be ready for that. I'm up here in the Catskill Mountains of New York, and we had the last melting of our snow like 2 weeks ago. Now it's 80 degrees, so I'm ready to get back in shape. So before I get there, just promise me one of those burgers, obviously.
Okay, we'll hook you up there.
Mike, any closing thoughts? And any maybe one thing I didn't get to. Mike is still there? Or we lost you? I guess we lost Mike on a technical difficulty. Anyway, well, Rodney, thank you so much. Mike is still there? Rodney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll have you back for sure. You were very helpful. Thank you to our viewers for watching. Our website is thecrisisshow.com. Our Twitter feed is @thecrisisshow. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again, Mike McKenna on Team Solutions in Texas. Have a good day, everybody. And again, final thought: our hearts and prayers go out to the families of the victims in this tragedy, and we do pray for the recovery of people who haven't been accounted for. Thank you again for watching, and have a nice day.